They scoffed at her worth, until a quiet cowboy laid down silver and ended their laughter. Clara Jenkins had always been a quiet, hard-working woman, the kind of person who let her actions speak louder than her words. She lived in a small town tucked away in the countryside, a place where everyone knew everyone else's business and gossip spread faster than the wind over the hills. Life in this town was simple, yet it was not easy. For Clara, it had never been easy. She had lost her husband at a young age, leaving her to raise 2 children on her own. The town pitied her at first, but soon that pity turned into doubt. People whispered that a widow with no one to support her could never succeed. They said she didn't have the strength, the brains, or the money to make anything of herself. Clara had heard these whispers many times, yet she never let them stop her. She owned the town's small general store, a modest wooden building with a faded green sign swinging gently in the breeze. Inside, shelves were lined with simple goods: flour, sugar, coffee, canned vegetables, and a few small toys for the children of the town. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and she ran it with pride. Every morning she swept the floors, dusted the shelves, and arranged the goods in neat rows. She greeted every customer with a warm smile, even when they barely returned the gesture. Her children, Emma and Jacob, were her world. Emma, at 12, was thoughtful and careful, always helping her mother around the store. Jacob, just 10, had a lively spirit, often getting into little mischiefs, chasing after chickens or kicking stones down the dusty streets. Clara worked hard so they could have what they needed: school supplies, proper shoes, warm coats in winter, but she also wanted them to grow up with dignity and self-respect. She did not want them to ever feel small or unworthy the way the townspeople often made her feel. Despite the constant judgment, Clara carried herself with quiet dignity. She never raised her voice when the neighbors mocked her. She never argued with those who laughed behind her back. Instead, she focused on her store, her children, and her small dreams. Each evening, after locking the doors and counting the day's earnings, she would sit by the window, sipping a cup of warm tea and gazing at the orange and pink sky. She often imagined a life where people respected her not for her circumstances, but for her determination, her intelligence, and her kindness. The townspeople, however, did not see her this way. They saw a widow who had lost everything, a woman living on the edge of struggle. Some of the wealthier residents would come into the store, pick up an item, and toss it back onto the shelf as if it were worthless. They would make small jokes about how she could never compete with the big stores in the city, or how a woman running a business alone was foolish. "She's just a little shopkeeper," they would say. "She's lucky she even has a roof over her head." Their words stung, but Clara knew they did not define her. One chilly autumn morning, as leaves tumbled across the streets and the air smelled of smoke from the chimneys, Clara noticed a group of townspeople gathered near the square, whispering and laughing among themselves. She kept walking, pretending not to notice, but a few words carried to her ears. "How does she think she can make it on her own?" one man snickered. "She'll never get anywhere without help." Clara's hands clenched briefly, but she took a deep breath and reminded herself that their laughter was empty and meaningless. Her strength came not from defiance but from perseverance. She had learned early that life was not fair. Losing her husband had been a cruel blow, but it had also taught her resilience. Every morning she woke before dawn, made breakfast for her children, and opened her store, determined to face the day no matter what challenges awaited her. Customers might ignore her, neighbors might scoff, but she would continue. Her spirit, though quiet, was unbreakable. The children noticed this strength in their mother. Emma often helped by arranging goods carefully on the shelves, sometimes asking questions about how to run the store well. Clara would patiently explain everything, from counting money accurately to speaking politely to difficult customers. Jacob, though more mischievous, respected his mother's determination. He had a mischievous smile, but he also had a sense of pride when he watched her work tirelessly, knowing that his family's small successes were because of her. Despite all this, Clara occasionally felt lonely. There were evenings when the laughter of the townspeople and the weight of their judgment pressed heavily on her heart. She would sit alone, listening to the wind and the distant barking of dogs, wondering if life would ever give her a chance to show the town who she truly was. She dreamed of a day when people would see her not as a struggling widow, but as a woman of strength. She imagined a life where her hard work would be recognized, where her voice would matter, and where her children would grow up proud of her.
It was during one of these quiet evenings that she realized she had already started that journey.
Every coin she earned, every customer she helped, every kind word she shared was a step toward proving her worth. The townspeople might never understand her fully, but Clara understood herself. She knew her value, and that knowledge gave her courage. Clara's life was a constant balancing act. She had to manage the store, care for her children, and navigate a town that often underestimated her. But she never let the weight of their opinions crush her spirit. Each challenge became a lesson, each scornful glance a reminder to work harder and smarter. She learned to budget carefully, negotiate deals with suppliers, and think creatively to attract customers. Her store began to grow slowly, not because of luck, but because of her careful planning and tireless effort. One day, a traveling salesman came to the town and remarked on how clean and organized Clara's store was. He complimented her on the quality of goods and her attention to detail. For the first time in a long while, Clara felt a spark of pride not based on survival, but on genuine accomplishment. She realized that her hard work was beginning to show, and even if the townspeople remained skeptical, she had something far more valuable: confidence in her own abilities. Even with all this progress, Clara never lost her humility. She helped customers without judgment, shared advice with young women in town, and treated everyone with kindness. She understood that respect could not be demanded. It had to be earned, slowly, through consistent action. And she was ready to earn it, step by step, day by day. The sun began to set on the town, casting a warm golden glow over the streets. Clara closed her store for the day, looked at the faces of her children, and smiled. Life was far from perfect and challenges were certain to come, but she felt a quiet strength growing inside her. One day, she thought, the town would have no choice but to see her for what she truly was, a woman of courage, wisdom, and unwavering determination. As she locked the doors and walked home with Emma and Jacob, the whispers of the town seemed to fade into the background. Clara knew that their scoffs and doubts were only temporary. Her journey was just beginning, and the world had yet to witness the quiet power of her resolve. The next morning, the town seemed the same, but Clara felt a faint stirring of change in the air. She opened her small store at the usual hour, sweeping the wooden floor and straightening the shelves, her children following close behind. Emma was humming softly as she placed jars in neat rows, while Jacob darted around, chasing dust motes in the sunlight that streamed through the windows. Clara couldn't help but smile. Life was still simple, still routine, but there was a feeling she couldn't quite name, a hint of possibility that today might be different. It happened in the afternoon, when the bell above the door jingled unexpectedly. Clara looked up and noticed a tall figure standing in the doorway. He wore a wide-brimmed hat, dusty boots, and a long coat that had seen many miles. His face was calm, composed, and carried a quiet confidence that immediately drew Clara's attention. He was a stranger in town, someone who did not belong to the small circle of familiar faces she saw every day. "Good afternoon," he said politely, tipping his hat slightly. His voice was low, smooth, and carried a gentle warmth. "I'm looking for some supplies. Thought I'd see what your store has to offer." Clara's first instinct was caution. The townspeople had taught her to be wary of outsiders. Sometimes they came with trouble or demands she could not meet. But there was something in the stranger's demeanor that made her relax slightly. He did not stare or demand. He spoke with respect. "I can help you," Clara said, stepping forward. "We have flour, sugar, coffee, canned goods, and some other essentials. What exactly are you looking for?" The man glanced around the store, taking in the neat shelves and the well-kept displays. "Just a few things for my journey, a bit of food, some soap, and maybe a blanket if you have one." His eyes met Clara's briefly, and in that moment, she felt as if he understood something about her life that the town had ignored. As Clara gathered the items, her children observed the stranger from a distance. Emma was curious, leaning slightly over the counter to get a better look. while Jacob's eyes widened with cautious excitement. Clara handed the man his items, and he counted the coins carefully, placing them on the counter with precision. "You run a fine store," he said quietly. "It's clean, organized, and welcoming. Not everyone does it this way." Clara felt a small surge of pride. Compliments were rare in this town, especially from strangers. She nodded politely. "Thank you. We try our best." The stranger smiled faintly. "I can see that." He paused, then added, "I'll be passing through for a few days. Thought I might stop by again." With that, he adjusted his hat, tipped it slightly, and walked out the door. The bell jingled behind him, leaving Clara and her children staring after him. "Who was that?" Jacob asked, breaking the silence. "I don't know," Clara replied softly, still thinking about the man. But he seemed different. Over the next few days, the stranger returned, always quietly, always polite. He introduced himself as Eli Parker, a cowboy traveling between towns. Unlike the other visitors who flaunted wealth or power, Eli spoke little of himself, focusing instead on the small details around him. He complimented the way Clara arranged her shelves, the care she took in helping customers, and even how she interacted with her children. Clara found herself looking forward to his visits, not because of romance or friendship alone, but because he saw her for who she truly was. The townspeople noticed Eli's attention to Clara, and as often happens in small towns, whispers and gossip began to swirl. "Why is that cowboy always hanging around her store?" some asked. "He must be odd." "He doesn't belong here." Others shrugged or laughed. "Maybe he's just bored," they said, but the whispers carried a hint of unease. People didn't like to see someone they looked down upon receive attention or respect, even from a stranger. Clara, however, paid little heed to the gossip. She focused on her work, and when Eli visited, they would share simple conversations about supplies, journeys, and life on the road. He never boasted about his skills or wealth, yet Clara could sense his experience and wisdom. He had a quiet strength, a presence that was steady and dependable, and she found herself learning from him without even realizing it. One afternoon, as a soft rain fell over the town, Eli entered the store holding a small bundle. "Thought you might like this," he said, placing it gently on the counter. Inside was a finely stitched blanket, soft and warm. Clara's eyes widened. Thank you," she said, feeling a warmth that was not just from the gift but from the thought behind it. Eli smiled faintly. "It's nothing grand. Just something useful. You deserve comfort after all your hard work." Clara felt a mixture of gratitude and surprise. No one in the town had ever acknowledged her efforts like this. Usually people judged her by her circumstances, laughed at her struggles, or offered pity she did not want. Eli, on the other hand, recognized her dedication and her skill. He treated her with respect, quietly, without drawing attention to himself or her. It was a new experience, and Clara felt her confidence growing in ways she had not expected. As the rain continued to fall, they spoke about the town, its people, and the challenges she faced running the store alone. Clara shared her dreams of expanding, of providing more for her children, and of one day earning the respect of the town that had long doubted her. Eli listened patiently, offering no criticism, only occasional advice that felt thoughtful and sincere. "You work hard," he said finally, as the rain pattered against the windows. "And you care deeply. That alone will take you far, if you don't let others' opinions hold you back." Clara nodded, feeling a quiet determination grow inside her. She had already endured so much, and here was someone who believed in her without judgment. The presence of Eli Parker, calm and steady, was beginning to change the way she saw herself. She realized that worth was not measured by the scoffs of neighbors, but by the consistency of one's actions and the courage to keep going despite doubt. Word of Eli's visit spread slowly through the town. Some were curious, some skeptical, and others quietly annoyed. Yet Clara remained focused on her store and her children. She was learning that respect could not be forced, that it came gradually, sometimes through the quiet support of someone who truly understood. One morning, as the sun rose and cast a golden glow over the streets, Clara opened her store and found Eli already waiting outside. "Good morning," he said, tipping his hat. "I thought I'd help today. Might as well see how things run." Clara hesitated. She had managed the store alone for years, but there was something about Eli's demeanor that invited trust. "All right," she said finally. "Thank you." The morning passed with quiet cooperation. Eli helped sweep the floors, restock the shelves, and even engaged politely with customers. His presence drew attention, and for the first time, some townspeople began to notice Clara in a new light. She was not simply a struggling widow. She was competent, capable, and running a store that could attract even strangers with experience and knowledge. By midday, Clara realized that her confidence had shifted. She had always been determined, but now she felt supported, not by pity, but by genuine recognition of her abilities. Eli Parker, with his quiet strength and thoughtful gestures, had shown her that being underestimated by others did not define her potential. As the sun set and the town streets glowed with warm light, Clara closed the store with a sense of hope. Life was still full of challenges, but she no longer felt entirely alone in facing them. A quiet cowboy had entered her life, not to change it dramatically, but to help her see the worth she had always carried quietly within herself. For the first time in years, Clara felt the possibility of more than survival. She felt the possibility of respect, recognition, and even a little joy. And though the town continued to whisper, she walked home with her children knowing that she was stronger than their judgment, and that a new chapter of her life had quietly begun. The town had been quiet for most of the week, but a sense of anticipation was beginning to ripple through its streets. Clara Jenkins had returned to her usual routine at the store, arranging goods and welcoming customers with her warm, practiced smile. Yet, even amidst the familiar chores, she felt a tension in the air. Word had spread about a coming event that could change the town in ways she had never imagined, a town auction of the main property, a place that could become the center of business or influence. Everyone talked about it endlessly, speculating who might bid and who might gain control. Clara listened quietly, feeling the eyes of the townspeople on her whenever she walked past, some filled with curiosity, some with disbelief. Clara knew the opportunity was enormous, but it was also daunting. She had always managed to keep her store afloat, but the auction was on a scale far beyond her small savings. Most of the town assumed she would not even attempt to participate. "Why would she try?" a wealthy landowner said aloud at the cafe one morning, shaking his head. "She doesn't have the money, the power, or the experience." Others nodded in agreement, chuckling quietly. Clara heard their words from across the street, her heart tightening, but she did not let them see her worry. She had endured scorn before. She could endure it again. Her children, Emma and Jacob, noticed her tension but did not fully understand it. "Why are people talking so much about some building?" Jacob asked, kicking a small pebble along the sidewalk. "Is it important?" Clara knelt beside him, brushing dirt off his sleeve. "It's important to the town," she said softly. "But more importantly, it's a chance to show that we can be strong and capable, even if others doubt us." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Like you, Mom," she said. "You've always worked hard even when people laughed at you. Maybe this is our chance to show them they were wrong." Clara smiled at her daughter, pride swelling in her chest. Her children were growing up with resilience and wisdom, much like their mother. The days leading to the auction were filled with planning and preparation. Clara counted her savings carefully, calculating every coin she could set aside for the bid. She spoke quietly with Eli Parker, who had become a steady presence in her life, offering guidance without judgment. He never told her what to do, but his advice was thoughtful and practical. "You don't need to compete with the richest people," Eli said one evening as they walked past the gently flowing river behind the town. "You only need to be smart and strategic. Even a modest bid can succeed if it's timed right and backed by careful planning." Clara nodded, feeling a surge of hope. She had always relied on her own intelligence and hard work, but Eli's calm guidance gave her confidence in her strategy. She realized that she did not need to match the wealth of others. She needed to act wisely and with courage. Finally, the day of the auction arrived. The town square was bustling with people, their voices blending into a chorus of excitement and speculation. Men and women from nearby towns had come to participate, some wealthy and imposing, others quiet but shrewd. Clara arrived early, her children close at her side, carrying a small pouch of coins that represented all she had saved over the past months. She felt her heart racing, but she steadied herself. This was more than money. It was a test of courage and determination. The auction began with loud voices and rapid bidding. The wealthy landowners set high amounts, their confidence evident in the ease with which they raised their hands. The townspeople watched, some whispering about Clara's audacity. "She'll never make it," someone muttered. "What does she think she's doing?" Others laughed outright, shaking their heads as Clara stepped forward, placing her modest bid on the table. The laughter stung, but Clara held her head high. She reminded herself that this was not about proving them wrong. It was about showing her children, and herself, that determination and intelligence mattered more than wealth. She took a deep breath, steadying her hands as the auctioneer looked down at her bid. For a moment the room fell quiet, a subtle tension filling the air. The wealthy bidders exchanged glances, perhaps amused, perhaps surprised, by the presence of the small shopkeeper trying to claim a stake in the town's property. The whispers grew louder, and Clara could feel the weight of their doubt pressing down on her. She focused on her children, on the trust they had placed in her, and on the quiet advice Eli had given her. Just then, Eli Parker stepped forward. His calm presence immediately drew attention. He reached into his coat and produced a handful of silver coins, laying them down carefully to back Clara's bid. The room went silent. People turned, their laughter dying on their lips as they processed what had just happened. A quiet, experienced cowboy who had kept to himself for days had chosen to support Clara. The gesture was simple yet powerful. Clara's eyes met Eli's briefly, and she felt a wave of gratitude and determination. She realized that this support was not charity, it was recognition. Eli saw her worth, her intelligence, and her courage. And now, the town could not ignore it. The auction continued, but Clara's bid, strengthened by Eli's support, held firm. Other bidders raised their amounts, but her strategic approach and careful timing allowed her to compete effectively. The wealthy landowners began to murmur among themselves, perhaps realizing that success was not always about having the most money. The quiet shopkeeper, aided by a steady friend, was showing skill, patience, and courage that few expected. Finally, after tense moments that felt like hours, the auctioneer called the final bid. Clara's name was announced. She had won. A wave of astonishment swept through the room. Some townspeople gasped, others whispered in disbelief, and a few tried to hide their embarrassment. The laughter that had once filled the square was gone, replaced by stunned silence. Clara felt a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. She had achieved something incredible. Not only had she secured the property, but she had done so with integrity, intelligence, and courage. Her children ran to her side, embracing her with excitement and pride. For them, their mother was no longer just a widow running a small store. She was a woman of vision and strength, capable of overcoming any obstacle. Eli Parker stood quietly behind her, tipping his hat with a faint smile. His support had been quiet, unassuming, yet it had made all the difference. Clara understood that true worth was not measured by wealth or loud declarations, but by courage, intelligence, and the willingness to act with integrity. The townspeople began to look at her differently. Some approached her with respect, others with curiosity, but none dared mock her as they had before. Clara felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that the journey to prove her worth was far from over, but that this victory marked an important step. She had shown herself, her children, and the town that determination and courage could overcome doubt and scorn. As the sun set over the town, casting long shadows across the square, Clara closed her store with a sense of accomplishment. The laughter of the town may have once weighed heavily on her, but now it had been replaced with recognition, respect, and a renewed sense of possibility. The future was still uncertain, but she had learned a vital lesson. When determination meets opportunity, and when one is supported by those who truly see their worth, even the quietest person can achieve extraordinary things. That night, as Clara sat with her children by the warm glow of the fireplace, she reflected on the day's events. The town had doubted her, laughed at her, and underestimated her. Yet through it all, she had stayed true to herself, her values, and her dreams. She had proven that strength, courage, and integrity could triumph over skepticism and mockery. And though challenges would surely come again, Clara felt ready. With Eli Parker's quiet support and her own unwavering determination, she knew that the journey ahead, no matter how difficult, could be faced with confidence and grace. After the excitement of the auction, Clara Jenkins felt a quiet sense of triumph. But she also understood that her journey was far from over. Winning the property had been a victory, yes, but it brought with it new responsibilities, new challenges, and, unexpectedly, new attention from the townspeople. Where once they had laughed at her, now many watched with curiosity and a hint of admiration. Yet, as often happens in small towns, admiration was fragile, and skepticism still lingered in whispers behind closed doors. Clara had not yet fully realized the magnitude of her accomplishment. The property she had secured was more than just land. It was a chance to expand her store, create opportunities for her children, and influence the town in ways that mattered. She dreamed of turning it into a place where people could gather, where families could buy essentials without fear of judgment, and where she could demonstrate that determination and integrity could achieve what others dismissed as impossible. The morning after the auction, Clara returned to the store with a renewed sense of purpose. Emma and Jacob followed closely, their eyes shining with pride. Clara had always taught them that effort and kindness were more important than wealth or status, but now they could see these lessons in action. Their mother had faced ridicule and doubt, yet she had persevered and achieved something remarkable. Eli Parker arrived at the store that day as quiet and composed as ever. He tipped his hat, offering Clara a faint smile. "Congratulations," he said simply. "You've earned this, every bit of it." Clara felt a warmth in her chest. Eli's presence had been a constant source of encouragement, his quiet support more valuable than any amount of money. "Thank you," she replied. "I couldn't have done it without your advice. Your guidance helped me see that I didn't need to compete with others' wealth. I just needed to act wisely." Eli nodded. "Sometimes quiet confidence is stronger than loud ambition," he said. "People often overlook those who seem small or powerless, but it's often the quiet ones who achieve the greatest things." Clara smiled, realizing that he spoke not only of her victory but also of life itself. She had been underestimated for so long that it was easy to forget her own strength. But Eli's faith reminded her that courage and intelligence could overcome doubt, ridicule, and even fear. Over the next few days, Clara began planning how to use the new property. She envisioned expanding her store, creating a space that could serve the town more effectively, and perhaps even offering work to those who needed it. She also wanted to teach her children the importance of responsibility and integrity, showing them that true success was not just about wealth, but about character and hard work. However, not everyone in the town was pleased with Clara's success. A few wealthy landowners who had once mocked her were now forced to confront her achievements. Their laughter and scoffing had turned to awkward silence and thinly veiled jealousy. Some attempted to undermine her efforts, offering false advice or making subtle criticisms. Clara, however, remained calm. She had learned that respect was earned through actions, not arguments, and she refused to be drawn into petty disputes. One afternoon, as Clara surveyed the new property, Eli appeared beside her. "It's a fine piece of land," he said, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "With careful planning, it could become something extraordinary." Clara nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "I want it to be more than just a store," she said. "I want it to be a place where people can feel welcome, where families can shop without fear of judgment, and where we can create opportunities for the children of this town." Eli smiled faintly. "And you will. You have the vision, the courage, and the determination to make it happen." As the days passed, Clara worked tirelessly to prepare the property for development. She cleaned, organized, and planned each step carefully, often consulting with Eli for advice. He helped her think through practical matters, how to manage finances, where to place shelves, how to create a welcoming environment for customers. But he never took control. He allowed Clara to lead, supporting her quietly and respectfully. The townspeople continued to watch. Some were skeptical, wondering if Clara could truly manage such a large project. Others were inspired, seeing in her determination a reflection of what was possible when one refused to give in to doubt or fear. Children in the town began to look up to her as a role model, while adults who had once mocked her were forced to reconsider their opinions. One day, a group of townspeople approached Clara as she worked, offering congratulations. "I have to admit," one said, his tone reluctant but sincere, "I didn't think you could do it. But you've proven me wrong. That was impressive." Clara smiled politely, accepting the acknowledgement with grace. "Thank you," she said softly. "I hope that what I'm doing can help not just my family, but the entire town."
Eli Parker, watching from a distance, noticed the subtle shift in the town's attitude.
He saw how Clara's quiet strength and careful planning had begun to change perceptions, how laughter and scorn were slowly giving way to respect and admiration. He also knew that her journey was not over. Challenges would continue to arise, but Clara had proven that she had the wisdom and courage to face them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara and Ellie sat on a wooden bench near the property, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. The day had been long, filled with hard work and small victories, but Clara felt a sense of peace. She knew that her actions were beginning to speak louder than the town's whispers. "You've done more than win an auction," Eli said quietly. "You've shown everyone that courage, intelligence, and perseverance matter more than wealth or status." Clara nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "I never wanted to prove them wrong for the sake of proving it," she said. "I wanted to show my children, and myself, that hard work and integrity can lead to something meaningful." Eli smiled faintly. "And you have. You've done exactly that." The days turned into weeks, and Clara continued to develop the property. She worked alongside her children, teaching them the value of effort and patience, showing them how to plan carefully and act wisely. Eli remained a steady presence, always offering advice when needed but never overshadowing her leadership. Together, they created a space that was inviting, practical, and full of potential. As word spread of Clara's accomplishments, the town's attitude began to shift further. People who had once scoffed now approached her with respect, some seeking guidance, others simply acknowledging her hard work. Clara remained humble, knowing that true respect was earned through continued action, not by a single victory. One morning, a local newspaper reporter arrived asking to write a story about Clara's achievements. She agreed, speaking candidly about her journey, the challenges she had faced, and the quiet support she had received from Ellie Parker. The article praised her determination, intelligence, and leadership, and soon, people from neighboring towns began to take notice. Clara's story was no longer just about a widow in a small town. It was about a woman whose courage and integrity had transformed her life and inspired those around her. Through it all, Clara never lost sight of her original goals: to provide for her children, to serve her town, and to demonstrate that worth was not measured by wealth, status, or public opinion, but by determination, integrity, and kindness. Eli Parker, always quietly supportive, continued to guide her, offering wisdom without intrusion, and standing by her as a steadfast friend and ally. By the end of the season, the property had been transformed. Clara's store had expanded, with more space for goods, a small area for community gatherings, and an environment that welcomed families from all over the town. The children of the town, once indifferent or dismissive, now looked up to her as a role model. The adults, even those who had once doubted her, could no longer deny her abilities and her character. Clara had achieved more than she had ever imagined. She had turned scorn into respect, doubt into admiration, and her quiet determination had reshaped not only her life but the perception of her entire community. And through it all, Eli Parker remained by her side, a quiet reminder that true support does not need to be loud to be powerful. As the sun set over the town, casting a warm golden light on the newly transformed property, Clara stood with her children, feeling a sense of fulfillment and hope. The town had laughed at her once, but now their laughter had been replaced by a deep, grudging respect. She knew that challenges would continue to arise, but she had proven, to herself and to the world, that courage, intelligence, and quiet determination could achieve extraordinary things. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Clara knew that her journey was far from over. There were more dreams to pursue, more opportunities to seize, and more lives to touch. But with her steadfast children and the quiet, loyal support of Eli Parker, she felt ready for whatever came next. The town had once scoffed at her worth, but now it had no choice but to recognize it. And the story of Clara Jenkins and her quiet cowboy ally had become a lesson that would be remembered for years to come. The mornings in the town had begun to feel different. Where once there had been whispers, laughter, and doubt directed at Clara Jenkins, there was now a sense of curiosity, respect, and cautious admiration. Clara herself noticed the change, not because people were praising her loudly, but because their attitudes toward her had shifted. She walked through the streets with her children, Emma and Jacob, and for the first time, strangers and neighbors alike greeted her with smiles and nods instead of sneers. Even the shopkeepers who had once glanced at her with subtle scorn now looked at her with acknowledgement, recognizing her as a woman who had quietly but powerfully transformed her life and her community. Clara had spent the past months working tirelessly to expand her store and make the property she had won into a place of opportunity. The work had been exhausting, but each day brought small victories. Shelves were restocked, a small area for community gatherings was set up, and families began to visit more often, drawn by the welcoming atmosphere and the sense of fairness and integrity that Clara maintained. She took pride in seeing children play quietly in a corner while their parents shopped, and she made sure everyone felt valued, regardless of wealth, status, or background. Eli Parker continued to be her quiet companion and ally. He never sought attention or praise, but his steady presence made a profound difference. He helped Clara organize shipments, plan expansions, and manage finances. Yet more importantly, he offered guidance and encouragement without ever overshadowing her. He had always recognized her potential, and now he quietly watched as the rest of the town slowly came to recognize it as well. The townspeople began to approach Clara more often, some seeking her advice and others simply wishing to understand the secret behind her success. "How did you do it?" one woman asked, a little nervously as she stood by the newly expanded front door of the store. "How did you turn so little into so much?" Clara smiled gently. "Hard work, planning, and patience," she replied. "And knowing that the people who truly matter will support you when it counts. You can't let doubt, laughter, or fear stop you. You have to keep going, even when others underestimate you." Her words carried a weight that could not be ignored. People listened, and slowly, they began to reflect on their own judgments. Some realized how unfair they had been. Others simply admired her courage from a distance. Clara's life had become a quiet lesson in resilience and character, teaching the town that true worth could not be measured by status or wealth but by integrity, perseverance, and determination. As the store flourished, Clara took a moment to look at her children. Emma and Jacob had grown in confidence and skill alongside her. Emma now helped manage small tasks in the store independently, learning not only the value of work but also the satisfaction of seeing effort rewarded. Jacob, still mischievous, had learned patience and focus, often assisting in organizing shipments or helping customers with a polite smile. Clara felt a deep sense of pride in seeing the lessons she had tried to teach them becoming real and meaningful. One afternoon, as the golden sun filtered through the windows of the store, Eli Parker arrived carrying a small bundle of letters. He handed them to Clara without a word, and she opened them to find notes from neighboring towns and even distant cities. People had heard of her story. The quiet widow who had been underestimated, who had won a chance when no one thought she could, and who had turned opportunity into lasting success. Some letters were of congratulations, others sought advice, and a few were simply expressions of admiration. Clara read them aloud to Emma and Jacob, who listened wide-eyed, amazed at the reach their mother's courage had achieved. Clara leaned back in her chair and allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. Her journey had begun with whispers and scorn, had passed through small victories and challenges, and had now reached a point where her work, her character, and her persistence were finally recognized. She realized that the true reward was not in the property, the store, or even the admiration of others. It was in the knowledge that she had stayed true to herself and had created a life of meaning and dignity for her family. As evening approached, The townspeople gathered for a small celebration organized by Clara and supported quietly by Eli. They had set up a modest gathering outside the store with benches, lanterns, and a small table of treats. Families came, children ran and laughed, and even those who had once mocked Clara approached with cautious smiles. The atmosphere was one of community and respect, a quiet acknowledgement of what had been accomplished. Eli stood beside Clara, his hat tipped slightly, a faint smile playing on his lips. He did not seek recognition, but his presence spoke volumes. He had been a steady hand throughout her journey, offering support without overshadowing her achievements. Clara looked at him and felt a deep sense of gratitude. His belief in her potential had helped her believe in herself. During the celebration, a town elder stepped forward and addressed the crowd. "There is someone among us who has shown remarkable courage and determination," he said, his voice strong and sincere. She faced doubt, ridicule, and challenge, yet she persevered. Clara Jenkins has reminded us all that worth is not given by wealth or loud words, but by actions, integrity, and resilience. Let us honor her today. The crowd erupted in applause, some hesitant at first, but growing louder as the message sank in. Clara felt her heart swell, not with pride for herself alone, but for the children she had raised, the community she had touched, and the quiet support of Eli Parker. She knew that this recognition was not just about one moment. It was the culmination of years of effort, patience, and courage. As the evening drew to a close, Clara and Eli walked through the town streets, now glowing with lantern light. The air was filled with laughter, conversation, and a sense of shared accomplishment. Clara reflected on how far she had come, from a woman underestimated by her neighbors, laughed at for her modest means, to someone whose courage and determination had reshaped her life and inspired others. "I never imagined it would be like this," Clara said softly, glancing at Eli. "I knew I wanted to provide for my children, to do what was right, but I never expected the town would come to see me this way." Eli nodded.
You did more than anyone could expect, he said quietly.
"You stayed true to yourself, and your actions spoke louder than their words. That is why they respect you now. Not because of the money or the property, but because of the courage and integrity you've shown every step of the way."
Clara smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart that went beyond pride.
She had not only changed her life, but had also influenced the people around her to see the value of resilience and determination. She knew that the town would continue to face challenges and that life would always bring unexpected trials, but she felt prepared. With her children growing up strong and capable, and with Eli Parker quietly supporting her, she had the confidence to face whatever lay ahead. Over the following months, Clara's store continued to grow and flourish. Families from neighboring towns came to experience the welcoming atmosphere she had created. She hired a few young adults from the community, giving them opportunities to learn valuable skills and earn an honest living. Her children continued to learn from her example, understanding that hard work, kindness, and perseverance were the true measures of success. Clara often reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the days filled with laughter and scorn, the nights spent worrying about how she would provide for her children, and the quiet moments when she wondered if she could ever prove her worth. She realized that every struggle, every doubt, and every effort had shaped her into the person she had become. And while she had achieved recognition and respect from her community, the true victory had always been the growth of her own character and the example she had set for her children. Eli Parker remained a constant presence in her life, always quiet, always steady. He never sought attention, never asked for acknowledgement, and never demanded anything in return. His support had been simple but profound, encouraging Clara to see her own potential and helping her act on it. Together, they had created something lasting, not just in terms of property or business, but in the way people perceived courage, perseverance, and true worth. As Clara looked out over the town from her newly expanded property one evening, the sun casting a warm glow over the streets, she felt a deep sense of peace. The town had once scoffed at her worth, but now it had no choice but to recognize it. She had proven that determination, integrity, and quiet courage could overcome even the harshest judgment. Her children were growing up strong and confident, The community respected her, and her life had been transformed in ways she had only dreamed of years ago. And while she knew that life would continue to bring challenges, Clara Jenkins now faced the future with courage, wisdom, and hope. The quiet cowboy who had believed in her when others doubted her had shown her the power of support, and together they had demonstrated that true worth was not something given or assumed. It was something built through action, perseverance, and integrity. As night fell, Clara stood at the edge of her property with Emma and Jacob by her side. The stars began to twinkle above, and she felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond wealth or recognition. She had built something lasting not just for herself, but for her family and her community. She had shown that even the quietest person, underestimated and doubted, could achieve greatness through courage, determination, and the support of those who truly see them. Clara smiled, knowing that her story would continue to inspire those around her. She had turned laughter and doubt into respect and admiration, proving that true worth was always visible to those who cared to see it. And with that knowledge, she walked home with her children, ready to face the next chapter of life, confident that they were prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead.